I've been running a lot of workshops lately on cognitive bias and being aware of our cognitive biases as we're making choices. And a question that always seems to inevitably come up with someone is like, if we've got all of this going on in our minds, how on earth do we try to influence other people? And that's where things can get really interesting. And so I thought that it would be great to run this session to talk about, well, how do we do that? And how do we try and amalgamate all of that together? So what we're talking about today is influence. And I thought I'd start with, I suppose, a little bit of a definition, like, well, what do I mean about influence? And I think influence is all about being able to shape or guide the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviors of other people. And we know that this is absolutely possible. Whoa, sorry, I'm clicking buttons all over the place. We know that this is absolutely possible to do. So what I want to do for the next, it's going to be about 30 minutes of me talking, and hopefully we'll get some interaction from all of you, and then making sure that I have plenty of time for questions. But this is going to be a bit of a taste test for a skill that can really help you to influence other people both effectively and efficiently. I think that that's really important, because you don't want to spend so long down a rabbit hole of trying to influence people that you actually don't get anything done. So there has to be a balance. And, you know, I suppose my version of what is influence is kind of a secret sauce, not just to work, but also to life, because we're always having to interact with other people. We need other people for so many different things every single day. So what I'm hoping is that at the end of this session, you're going to walk away and you're going to start seeing where this kind of influencing is done well and where it isn't being done well. And you can start to really see, you know, how are ads talking to you? How are people trying to influence you? What are salespeople doing? What are you seeing in different, you know, advertising in shops, etc.? Because that's all influence, because it's all about how we think. So I just want to start by saying thank you very much to everyone. You might, I mean, $5 doesn't even buy a cup of coffee these days, does it? Every time I buy a cup of coffee, I go, really? It's like $7.50? What is that? So I wanted to say thank you for the Lily Grace Foundation. We've raised $85 from this session, which doesn't sound like much, but that's just a little bit over 2 months supply of insulin for a child who might not otherwise get access to this life-saving medication. So thank you very, very much. I'm sure that the team at Lily Grace will be very happy to receive that donation, but I haven't made it yet. But Chippo, who's actually the founder of the Lily Grace Foundation, is on the call today, so she will pressure me to make the donation at some point today if I do not. So thank you very much. Right, into the session. For anyone who doesn't know me, and I know there's a couple of people on the call who don't know me, I'm Dr. Samantha Rush. I am absolutely fascinated about how people think, what goes on in here, and how does that influence how we make decisions, the decisions that we're aware of, and I think also the decisions that we're not aware of that our brain is making on our behalf, which, you know, might be what we want and might be not what we want. And then even more interesting is when you get a group of people together. So that might be a team or a family or whoever that is. And how does all of that work in the mix? And how does that change how we make decisions? So that's me. Okay, so influence. What does influence do for us? I'd love to hear from you either in the chat, or if you're comfortable to do, unmute yourself. What were you thinking when you registered to come for this session? So this, you know, knowing what it is, why people are saying yes, no, or not now, what kind of made you think, I could use some of that, because I'd really like to be able to do, I need to know more about that. So let's see what you were thinking. Ongoing opportunities with stakeholders internally. That is a massive one, Catherine, massive one. Being a parent, you know, you say that, Krista, in the workshops that I run on this, because I do run corporate workshops on this topic, and there's always someone in every single session who will go, I've decided I want a workshop dealing with my teenager today, and how do I get my teenager to do their homework or something like that. And it's exactly the same. It's human, getting decisions across the line. You get more no's than yeses, May. So you want to know how to get more yeses. Excellent. Decisions across the line. Better understand the non-logical decisions that happen and how to navigate that. There are so many of those, and we're going to have a look a little bit in a little bit about some of the research that looks at where are most of our decisions made. Is it the logic part of our brain, or is it the emotion part of our brain? And getting more senior execs on board. I have got you all covered. We are going to do this. Obviously, we have not a lot of time to go through all of this detail, so this is going to be like a bite-sized snack, but there will be something that you can take out and try and experiment with. For anyone who's been on any of my masterclasses before, you know I always issue a challenge at the end, and then I arrange time for us to catch up if you'd like to talk about the challenge and how it went. Implementing a big change in your organization. No, you can't do it on your own, Amanda, at all. And if you can kind of, I shudder to use this term, but lubricate it, then that's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier. So let's talk about what having more influence can mean for you. And apologies, my mouse seems to be taking on a life of its own, so I'll move to a click button. So drive change, there was that in the list. Achieving your goals, building relationships, enhancing leadership, navigating politics, and what organization doesn't have politics, and even families have politics as well. And career advancement, because if you can influence people well, people go, hey, yeah, that person's like, they're really good. They're on it. They've achieved all of these things. So therefore, you start to see opportunities that maybe you might not otherwise, or that other people might not otherwise see. So influence is something that I think most of us want to be able to have to make our lives easier. So that sounds really great, but we also have to understand what are the barriers to being able to influence people well. And there's a lot of different factors, but I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What are the things that from your experience can make influencing people hard? So what do you think might make the difference as to, or what can get in the way, I suppose, of getting that yes that you want? And why do you think you might be getting a no or a not now? Or can you get me some more data on this? Or can you go and answer this question? Beliefs? Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Personality types definitely will be one. Legacy issues, competing priorities, lack of alignment. Yeah, articulating the why, different risk tolerances. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big one. Type of personality you're dealing with. All of these factors, which is a lot, right? There's a lot going on, and this is my list of things that I see a lot that have gotten in the way. So I suppose a little bit of a sidebar at this point. So I've been teaching this topic of how do you take your message and try and make it into a compelling format to influence people's choices. So I've been teaching this topic. The first time I taught this was in 2014. And the reason that I ended up doing this was I was doing a project with the Wharton School of Business over in Pennsylvania, and I kind of, threw my toys out of the cot at one point, and I said to my team, that's it, we've got to find a different way to message this. And so I kind of invented a little bit of a process for us to follow, and our presentation was deemed as the very best one. And afterwards, Professor Len Lodish, who was the professor of marketing at the Wharton School of Business, came to me and said, what did you do? Can you teach other people, so other people in the Wharton School of Business, how to do this? So the following year, I taught the same cohort of the project that I'd been in, which was about 60 people, and that was in San Francisco. So that's kind of how all of this started. Sidebar, and we're back. So there's a lot of things that can influence how people see and interpret the message that you're giving them, because that's essentially what they're doing. So they're hearing what you're saying or whatever you're sharing with them, what you're showing them, and they're interpreting it based on a whole bunch of different levels of what's going on in their mind. So we mentioned quite a lot of them. We've got the competing agendas, that everyone's fighting for the same resource. No, I don't want you to have that time with IT. I need that time with IT, or I need that person. Short attention spans. There's a lot of research that's out there around how our human attention span just continues to shrink. And I think the last research that I saw from 2022 was that the average attention span, especially on a digital device, is now 7 seconds, which is officially 1 second less than a goldfish. So that's just kind of what we're working with in our minds, especially when we're in a digital space. We're all trying to work quickly. We're all busy. We've got pressures. We've got, the next meeting we have to get to, or the next thing that we have to do. And so our mind is really, continually running on stress mode. And we know that when our brain is on stress mode of, I need to do this and I need to move to the next thing, we're actually not thinking properly because our prefrontal cortex is shutting down. Instant results, distractions. So we've been on this call now for 12 minutes. Has anyone had the temptation to see what's happening in their inbox? Or have they had a ping on their phone? This is the environment that we are all in, my friends. And everyone who's listening to you, if you're presenting online or in person, this is exactly what's happening to them. There's something happening that's distracting them. And then, of course, we have cognitive biases, which are the mental shortcuts that our brains have, just really to be able to help us function. But what's happening here is that our mind's processing information and it's making autonomous choices like AI. Let's call it natural intelligence. Our brain is making choices about which pieces of information to bring into our consciousness and which ones to filter out. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, yeah, all right, there might be one or two of those. I'd like to introduce you to the Cognitive Bias Codex. And so there are 188 documented biases that human beings have, and in the way that we think. So these shortcuts in how we see things and process information. And so any one of these, and they can exist together, so they can be stacked. So we could be maybe under the influence of, and I say under the influence, but I suppose that's rough terminology, but we could be being influenced by, and our thinking might be influenced by 2, 3, 4, 5 of these cognitive biases all at the same time. And a lot of the time, these will be outside of our consciousness, so we've got no idea what's happening. And the same is for people who are listening to us and deciding whether or not they're going to give us a yes, a no, or a not now. So now we can kind of go, oh, that was a lot on that slide about cognitive biases. If you've got some time, I do recommend having a bit more of a read about them. If you just Google Cognitive Bias Codex, but not now, you will have yourself a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. So what does getting a yes mean? Or you might be looking for a no, but whatever that affirmative answer is that you're looking for, what it means is that you need to give someone a compelling enough case so that they can make a decision based on what they need. So you're already working hard, right? So spending more time, more hours, getting more data, more information, more graphs is not necessarily going to be the answer. And for anyone who's worked with groups of people who are giving approval, you've probably experienced where you've done everything that they've asked like 5 times and they still come back asking for more things. So working harder isn't the answer. My argument is that actually increasing your influence and your ability to persuade people is the answer. What does that mean? So there's 3 things that are involved. This is certainly my experience and what I teach. The first thing is that you know your audience, that whatever you're presenting to them is actually relevant for them. Because when someone feels like, actually, that's really important for me right now, that makes you all getting an affirmative answer a heck of a lot easier. So number 1 is knowing your audience. We'll talk a little bit more about each of these. Number 2 is emotion. A lot of people think that emotion doesn't belong in the workplace, or that emotion should be kept out of decision-making or attempts to influence. I beg to differ. And I will tell you why in a moment. Emotion is very, very important. And number 3 is trust. And if you can do all of those 3 things in the way that you're making recommendations or you're asking for something, if you can do all of those 3 things, make it relevant for your audience because you know them, you've added emotion, and you've been able to improve or influence how they see you from a trust perspective, then your message is going to be more compelling, which means that they're more likely to be able to give you what you want in terms of an answer. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of those, and that first one around knowing your audience. I mentioned before about cognitive biases, and there's a couple of cognitive biases that are at play with the way that we see other people. So one of them is called the curse of knowledge, and another one is called the false consensus bias. And what these 2 cognitive biases do is they make us think that everyone knows what we know and that everyone thinks the way that we think and that they agree with what we agree with. My very first structured technique that I developed around this topic of how do I message in a compelling way actually came through working with someone in my office to help them be able to have a more compelling message to try and get approval for they wanted to upgrade some software. He was a solutions architect at an organization that shall remain unnamed. Let's call him Tom. So he'd been trying to get this approval. It was an $8 million system upgrade, and this was back in about maybe 2019, so it's probably about 15 million by now. And every time he went to the steering committee, they kept saying, can you get us this more information? Can you cut it this way? Can you show it this way? Can you go and get this question answered? And this had been going on for months, and he was so frustrated to the point of, you know, really raising his voice in these meetings. He was incredulous that why couldn't they see that we needed to do this? And what I really quickly realized is the way that he was communicating his message made sense from his perspective, based on what he knew and based on what he believed. But the people who were sitting around that table giving their yes, no, or maybe, they weren't like him. They were very different. They had very different agendas. They had very different things that were pressures for them, very different risk appetites. And yet he was presenting to them from his perspective. So on the basis of that discussion with him, I went away and I developed a structured technique. I got back with him to actually work through it with him. What might be a different way that we can sell this, if you like? And the next meeting came up and he got his approval. And all that came, it was about half an hour. We sat down together and we worked through it. And he had a heck of a lot less resistance and he got the upgrade that he needed. It was all a matter of actually pulling apart what it was that he wanted them to do and why in a way that actually met their language. But our default is, as human beings, we communicate through the eyes of ourselves. But that's not necessarily going to be helpful because everyone is not like us. So that's I suppose the story. The structured technique that I use is really about how can we try and dig down to enough detail about our audience so that we can actually tell them what they need to know in order to make a choice. And the way that I do this is across 4 different levels. So there's the surface level, there's the looking at the decision-making factors, there's the communication factors, and then how ready are they actually to make a choice? And within each of these, there's a series of questions for you to go through and answer to help you understand them better. If you don't know your audience well, there are lots of different opportunities to try to understand them better through talking to other people, you know, catching up with them for a coffee if you can, talking to people who are like them in that kind of role. There's lots of different ways that you can try and get this information. But if you can understand your audience better, you're more likely to be able to take off your me goggles, if you like, and present something to them in a way that's going to be helpful. I've got a funny story for you on this. So for my other half's 30th birthday, the gift that she got was a single trundle bed from her mother. Now, why would someone need a single trundle bed as a 30th birthday gift? I will tell you why. So that my mother-in-law had somewhere comfortable that she was happy with to stay when she came to our house. So this gift has been thought of and purchased and prepared through the eyes of the person who's buying it. And if you think about it from your perspective, if what you got for something like your 30th birthday was something that you knew actually was what the person who buying it wanted, like that doesn't feel great. I think that was in a Simpsons episode many years ago. I think Homer bought Marge a bowling ball for her birthday or for Christmas, and it didn't go down well. So, you know, when you're buying something for someone or you're presenting something to someone, you need to think about who they are. What do they like? What don't they like? And work out what might be the best way to do it. So knowing your audience, very, very fundamental. The next one about emotions. So emotions definitely belong in the workplace. And the reason for that is because we actually can't take them out. So Baba Shiv, who is with Stanford, he's done a lot of research in this space, hooking people up with big machines that look at which part of their brains are activating when they are making decisions. And what his research has found that 90 to 95% of every single decision that we make is made by the emotional regions of our brain, not the logical regions of our brain. So when you're presenting a case for something that you're wanting someone to get a yes from someone or an affirmative response, if you're presenting graphs, data, facts, all of that, it actually might not get you what you want. We think that humans are logical. We are not, as you can see from this research. So how do we do this? There's a lot of different emotions that humans can feel, and different emotions trigger different neurotransmitters within our brain and our body. And those neurotransmitters drive us to do different actions. And so this is a small selection of the emotions that humans can feel and the neurotransmitters and the actions that come with them. So, for example, you know, if we have something really exciting that's happened, like you've been working on a project for 12 months, and you know, it's been such a slog, it's been so hard, and you finally get to the end and it's done and there's no problems. Like that's a celebration, and you'll probably jump up and click your heels and get your besties at work and go, let's go to the pub. Yes, this is fantastic. And you won't be able to help doing that, because that celebration, you know, that real kind of achievement, that pleasure that comes with achieving something that you've been working hard for, or let's say if you won the lotto, you can't help but celebrate. It's just what happens. You want to get other people together and celebrate for that. And at the other end, you know, we have a more negative emotion. And something like that is responsibility and guilt, which are really powerful emotions to drive action. I'm sure all of us have been on a guilt trip at some point in the past. That's how powerful that is. Immediately you go, oh, I really need to do this to demonstrate that, you know, I'm an okay child to my mother who wants me to go and do this thing, or whatever it is, whatever kind of guilt trip that you have. So a couple of points about these emotions. We have the yellow ones at the top. So they are positive emotions, and the ones at the bottom, the negative emotions. And it's really important to note that positive emotions aren't good and negative emotions aren't bad. It's just how it makes us feel. And any of them might be appropriate when you're trying to influence people. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using a negative emotion to influence someone if it's right for the person and it's right for the circumstance. And I talked before about that stacking of the cognitive biases. The same things happen here. You can in your message planning, you can stack these emotions so that you take people on an emotional journey to lead them to the response that you want them to have. This is like a teeny tiny snippet of this work on emotions. Another really interesting one that's used a lot in some advertising is shame. So that's a very interesting one, and what someone will do in that case. So when you're thinking about emotion, the place to start is, who is my audience? I need to understand them better. What is it that I want them to do? And then the last thing for you to think about is, what's the emotion that's going to drive that action? So how do I then frame my message in a way that's going to elicit that emotion? I have some fun things that can help us work out how to do that. So for example, let me just, I should have put this together a little bit earlier, but it was sitting here on my desk. Does anyone remember these chatterboxes from childhood? Yeah, you remember these? So within this is one to help you work out what are some different ways that I can frame a message using all of these different emotions. So if I've got something like, you know, I need $8 million for this, how can you do that using all of these different emotions? So yeah, you can see those there. And there's examples of the framing that's in there, so that it's a little bit of a guide, I suppose, to looking at how can I change around what my message is that might elicit different emotions. But obviously we don't have a lot of time to do all of that today. So that's number 2, that's emotion. Number 3 is all about trust, and trust is multifaceted. And to be trustworthy and seen as trustworthy, you need to have all of these things. So your data needs to be accurate. You need to have credible sources. You know, it needs to be right, because if there's one thing, and I'm sure you've all been in something like this, where someone goes, where'd you get that number? Yeah, I don't think that number's right. And then, you know, you've kind of really lost your chance. So you've got to do all of these things. And I think that these days, more than ever, transparency is really important, as is a balanced perspective. Because if people can sniff that you're being biased in your presentation and leaning more one way than the other, then you can kind of, again, have a you know, you can kind of lose your chance. But that's not all. I feel like I'm selling a set of steak knives, but wait, there's more. Trust is also about these things. So especially when you're doing something in person or online is even more interesting, because trust is harder to earn online and it breaks faster online. Trust is also about these things. Can be as simple as how you're breathing. What are you doing with your hands? What are you doing with your eyes? So all of these things come together to influence how trustworthy someone sees that you are, and therefore by default, what is it that you're asking them to do? I just want to pause for a second to see if anyone has questions. I know we haven't gotten to question time yet, but that's okay, because there's a lot there. May, I see one of yours, the range of flexibility on that 9. Yeah, absolutely. There will be a range of flexibility, because again, remember, not everyone's the same, but what his research found was that range of between 90 and 95% was the average, but there will be some that are more and less, of course.
Okay, that's good to know. So, because I'm starting to think, like, you know, colleagues at work who are like really high I, probably would be like a 95, but again, that could be just me being judgmental. So that's where the question came from.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, someone who's a high C, you know, so for those who don't know, DISC, I is about influence, like interactions with people, and C is about conscientiousness. And so if someone's a high C, their emotion will be about, I have to get this right. I have to get this right. Otherwise, what will people think of me? What will that mean about me? So there's still emotions with those folks as well. And as I quite say, I do work with a lot of engineers, and as I say to them, even engineers have emotions, people. They're just maybe about something slightly different.
Oh, which
body language. Sorry, yes, I was just reading the comments.
Oh, sorry. Which leads me, what you just said leads me to my next question, actually. Is there a way using the emotional framing wheel to kind of correlate which emotion, like a C would relate more to a responsibility kind of emotion, and I would respond more to a, you know what I mean? So like if we have like a matrix of some sort.
That's I love where you're going, May, but what you're trying to do is simplify something that's really complicated. And even if you could do that, depending on the context that you're in, what does the individual just come from, what it's about? Do they have a particular thought process about the people who are in the room? So even though we could do that, it's not a guarantee. So I always like to err on the side of, let's actually think about who it is that we're working with first. So that might be part of your analysis process. which is going to be a bit of a finger in the wind, right? Because you're never really going to know for sure. How do you master body language in a virtual setting? Amanda, there are definitely ways that you can do that. And sorry, everyone, I'm just plugging in my my charger. I just got a message. There are definitely ways that you can do that, looking at your body language online. So when you're in a small box online, you have a much smaller space to work with. And so there are things like, you know, your ratio that you're in, how are you using your hands, where are you using your hands? So obviously your hands have to be a little bit closer into a box, and, you know, where are your eyes going? There are definitely ways that you can do that in a virtual setting. It's just intentional. And that's really, I suppose, the key message behind all of this. How do you think about what you're communicating, not just the content, but actually your whole thing in a more intentional way? That's really what it's all about. The tools or phone apps to practice this body language thingy. The best way to practice, May, is actually to get some resources and practice. So apps, there isn't one. I think the session I ran a couple of weeks ago, and I was sharing some structure techniques. Actually, Ashton, who's on the call, was at that one. And someone said, have you got an app like with all of these things? I don't, but definitely we can talk about what are some things that you can do. In Mirror, that's it. Absolutely, the Mirror. Or what I usually recommend is record yourself and watch it back. I know that's super cringy and everyone hates that. But if you're doing something in the mirror and you're practicing, you're actually your brain's trying to multitask. You're trying to do and you're trying to analyze and critique your performance at the same time. So you're far better off to do it and then watch it back. And then you can divide your attention rather than having your, you know, trying to do two things at once. Because even though we women think we can multitask, I can tell you there is scientific proof women cannot multitask. Nobody can multitask. All you're doing is doing multiple things badly. Women might be able to do slightly better badly, but not well. Okay, so let's continue. So wrap up. So what we're talking about, if you want to be more influential and get more affirmative answers or more yeses rather than no's or not nows, then these three things is a really good foundation for you to think through. I'm going to analyze my audience. I really want to understand my audience and make sure that what I'm sharing is relevant for them. Because if it's not relevant for them, they're going to filter it out. Number two is emotion. How can I use emotion and harness the power of emotion to get someone to do what I want them to do? And I will just add quickly, I'm not talking about, you know, this is horrible manipulation. This is all not being used for nefarious purposes. And normally when I talk about something like this, I'm like, oh, you know, you're manipulating people. You're not trying to get people to do anything that's bad. You're not trying to, you know, do anything that's going to get anyone in trouble. And certainly I wouldn't advocate for that. But this is, how can you just make what needs to be done and is for good reasons a little bit smoother? And then number three is about trust. How can you make sure that you are coming across as trustworthy as possible in your content as well as you, to make sure that, you know, you're going to lower the barriers of suspicion in the people that you're talking to. And not just suspicion, but I suppose that kind of really critical pulling apart as opposed to constructive pulling apart, which is a different kettle of fish. So it is not natural for our brains to think this way because of all of these cognitive biases. We think that everyone's like us, and that's our starting place. You're just like me. So I'm just going to chuck down some thoughts on how I'm going to say this to them in a way that's going to get me what I want, because everyone's like me, right? No. And so I'm a really big advocate for what I call scaffolding. So how can I scaffold the thinking and the planning around how do I message to be more influential? And so to help that scaffolding process, I use a range of structured techniques. So there's one that I have for knowing your audience, which we looked at a portion of that before. There's another one for looking at how do I actually plan my message and how can I play around with what might be the emotional angles and which do I think is going to have the biggest impact for this specific audience. And then there's another one around how do I actually start to build my message, and how do I do it efficiently? So there's a range of structured techniques that I have to help do this. I'm going to give you part of one of those today for your challenge. So Janine is going to stick it into the chat for you to be able to hopefully download. And so you're going to get this to work through. So what you need to do is really think about your audience. There's some prompting questions there. What's their role? What are they concerned about? Like, what are the things that they don't like? Another question that's really important to ask is, what kind of things do they hear about all day? Because if you've got a group of people that hears about risk things all day, and you're coming in with a risk message and you're trying to, you know, make them fear something, then you're just going to blend in with everyone else. So is there a different way that you can present to get better attention? And then look at how actually am I going to ask, what exactly am I going to ask them? So working through this. So there's the process of, I suppose, planning your messages, and then there's the planning of building your messages, with this, which is something a little bit different. And I call that building the messages process, and they're kind of one thing. I call it storyboarding. And in my experience, if you can do this, it makes your communication a little bit like WD-40. So it's smooth, it's easy, it's effective. It's going to stop the squeaks of people who want more and more and more information. So what we've been through today in the last 40 minutes is a portion of one of the three phases, I suppose, of building compelling messages and influential messages, called analyze and understand. It's the first part of building these messages that drive impact. So this is the method that I've been, perfecting over the last however many years, 12 years, and it really changes how you think about communication. Okay, back to you, your challenge. I'd love for you in the next week to pick something that you need to communicate. And I'd love for you to use this tool to help you plan it out. So who am I talking to? If it's a message you're delivering to multiple people, what I suggest you do is either break that down into separate people, or you focus on who's the key person who's going to give you the affirmative answer and look at it from their perspective, as opposed to trying to do something that's going to fit everyone. Because if you try and do something that's going to fit everyone, it's a bit of a spray and pray approach, and you're probably going to miss the mark. So one particular audience. So use it, deliver it, see how it goes. So I'm going to stick 15 minutes, an appointment in your diary. If you don't want to catch up with me, it's perfectly fine. I understand. Just decline the invite, please, so that I'm not sitting there going, oh, I wonder if they're coming. It's perfectly fine. Just decline it. But if you do want to have a chat about, how you went, how the plan went, any troubleshooting, how you found the answer that you got, I'd really love to do that. If you do want to catch up at the time that we send you isn't right, just let us know. We can find another time. If you have enjoyed this and you would like to learn more, I'm getting some expressions of interest to run a full day. I normally only run these in organizations. Hang on, my chat seems to have moved. There we go. I normally only run these within organizations. I don't normally run kind of public sessions of this. But if you are interested in sitting through a day with me, learning exactly how to do this, bringing along something from your work and really workshopping it to find out, how might I be able to do this well, then please register your interest there. And if I get enough interest, I'll put one on. Questions? I would love any other questions that you have in the remaining time that we have. Comments are also welcome. Oh, you're welcome, Chippo.
Thank you, Sam. It was good to hear you speak in an amazing framework, and obviously you delivered with so much confidence.
Thank you.
Yeah, ticking a few boxes, and most definitely looking forward to our 15-minute chat.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, the framework that I put my own money where my mouth is, I use this framework to plan my messaging as well. And it makes, apart from, making it more likely to hit the mark, it makes it so much more efficient. So just to give you an idea, I can storyboard, which we didn't talk about yet, but that's the process of the building. I can storyboard like probably a 2-hour talk in about 45 minutes. That's not building my collateral. That's just building my story in a really compelling way. And if you've ever tried to like create a presentation before of what it is you want to say, it takes a hell of a lot more than that. And you waste a lot of time going, oh, I'll use that picture. No, wait, I won't use that one. I'll make that graph. Oh, no, that doesn't quite fit the mark. And so you waste a lot of time building. So it's definitely a more efficient way to work. And we're all about efficiency. Well, if there's no other questions, I wish you a wonderful Friday. I look forward to seeing you in our 15 minutes. Yes, your goldfish brain. That's it. That's it. You're absolutely on the money there. But you can see it, right? You can absolutely see it, that we're so distracted by everything about us. If you've got any questions, please just hit me up. Otherwise, I really look forward to seeing you in our 15-minute catch-up. Have a great day.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.